Understanding what marketing strategies are right for you with Mark Homer, episode 264. Are you ready to make your law firm a profit-generating machine that will free up your time and skyrocket your impact? With more than 2 decades of business growth experience and having proven that you can be successful while prioritizing your family and your impact, introducing the Profit with Law podcast. I am your host, the creator of the Firm Differentiator 10X Effect, Moshe Amsel. Well, hello and welcome to another amazing guest interview here on the Profit with Law podcast. I'm your host, Moshe Amsel, and I'm always excited. But today I am super excited because my guest is somebody who is long overdue here on the podcast. When I first got started in the legal, serving the legal space, I had this crazy harebrained idea of creating a virtual conference for lawyers to be able to learn what they needed to learn to grow their firm, to bring content that maybe wasn't being covered at other conferences, but also to bring it in a way that people didn't have to leave their home, make travel plans, get on a plane, and which really cuts out a lot of people from being able to attend an event like that. And when I pitched it I had just met Maddie Martin. I don't know how our paths crossed, but somebody connected me to Maddie. Actually, I do remember how our paths crossed. Somebody connected me to Maddie, and I pitched this idea to her, and she got excited about it. And she told me, "You have to meet Mark." This is Mark Homer from GNGF. I then reached out to Mark, and he heard what I had to say, and he's like, "Listen, it's a great idea, and anything that Maddie's behind, I'm in." So I had Maddie and Mark backing me on our first law firm growth summit, and then shortly after our first conversation, I had the opportunity to be out in California to speak at an event. And it was at the same time that Clio's event was going on. So this is all pre-COVID, obviously. In-person events were a thing. And I took the drive. It was an hour drive from where I was down to San Diego to go to, on one evening when they were having the Clio After Dark party, there was a rooftop party someone else was putting on. I don't remember who it was. And I went there and met with Maddie, who started introducing me to a bunch of people that we had spoken on the phone, but hadn't really met. And on the way out, she's like, "Oh yeah, that's Mark, by the way." And I, introduced myself to Mark, and I had a car, and they were going to this party. They didn't know how they were getting there. And I said, "You know what? Why don't you guys get in the car?" We drove over there, and on the way over, we started chatting, and we really hit it off. We talked about profit first. We talked about a lot of the things that are going on in the legal industry. And from there, Mark then became a partner in being a content provider in the Law Firm Growth Incubator. We've recently changed the structure of the incubator collectively, but Mark has been involved in our brand and in our community for quite some time. So it's definitely long overdue that we have him here on the podcast. So let me just tell you a little bit about him. Mark is the author of Online Law Practice Strategies, which is in its 5th edition. It's an amazing book. It's been a great marketing resource for law firm owners for over 10 years. He's a co-host on the podcast, Your Law Firm is a Business, Take It to the Next Level. And he's the founder of Get Noticed, Get Found, GNGF, a leading law firm marketing agency. And I just add, he's an authentic person, family man, and really knows his stuff when it comes to not only marketing, but really a lot of the business of legal, and a lot of what's going on, not just in marketing, but in legal tech and productivity. I mean, that's what his new podcast is about, which he's doing together with the co-host, Melanie Leonard, who's another person that we have a strong relationship with. So I'm just ecstatic about this conversation we're about to have. I don't know what we're going to cover, but I'm ecstatic about it, and I can't wait to share Mark with you. Before I do that, stay tuned. We're going to give you a quick word from our sponsors. We'll be right back. Finding amazing employees is the toughest job for any business, and especially for a law firm. You deserve to be the law firm owner you've always wanted to be, but you can't get there without a great team. Get Staffed Up helps you build your all-star team by staffing your law firm with incredible full-time offshore virtual assistants. Work with Get Staffed Up to save money and your biggest resource, time, while they find you the best English-speaking VAs in the world. Hashtag delegate your way to freedom. To learn more, go to profitwithlaw.com/get staffed up. profitwithlaw.com/get staffed up. Thanks to our sponsor, Smith AI. Smith AI is a superior virtual receptionist service for small businesses. They specialize in working with solo and small law firms. I discovered Smith AI a couple of years ago and was blown away by the range of services, which are available at a cost any attorney, even those of you in the smallest solo practice, can afford. Their friendly receptionists respond to potential clients in English or Spanish, screen and schedule new leads, and even take payment for consults. The best part is, they don't just handle these conversations by phone. They also have live agents and chatbots capturing leads on websites and via text message. If there's one growth hack to your practice, this is it. Smith's friendly gatekeepers can staff your front lines. They'll capture new leads while you work uninterrupted. You can finally have the peace of mind that while you're working, you're not missing out on future work. Plans start at just $210 a month for calls and $140 a month for chats. They even offer a totally free chatbot, so there's no excuse. Try Smith AI today and see for yourself why attorneys like Justy Nickel in Colorado say Smith AI receptionists are the secret to business growth and client happiness. Smith AI offers a free trial, and podcast listeners can get an extra $100 discount with promo code ProfitLaw100. That's ProfitLaw100. Sign up and learn more at www.smith.ai. Trust me when I say, don't let another day go by. Try Smith AI. All right, and we are back. Mark, welcome to the show.
Hey, Moshe, thanks for having me. You're right. This is long overdue.
Yep. It's, I was thinking, like, when was it that we connected when in person? And I think it was like October of 2019.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's almost 2 years since then. And I just couldn't believe I don't know when we discovered that I hadn't had you on the podcast before. And I couldn't believe that was the case, because if you search on my website or you do a podcast search for Profit with Law and put your name in, you actually come up in like 6 or 7 or 8 episodes, because any Q&A that we did around the Law Firm Growth Summit that we repurposed on the podcast, your name is in there. But having you as an exclusive guest, this is the first time. Now, what I like to do is when we start, I want people to know who you are. Some of them, probably a lot of my listeners, know exactly who you are, but some people listening have never heard of you, and they want to know, like, okay, who is this guy? Is he an attorney? Is he not an attorney? How did he get into legal marketing? Why legal? Maybe give us some broad strokes about your journey and how you arrived at where you're at today.
Yeah, I mean, it was a long and circuitous journey to get to where I am. But I've been working with law firms now, specifically around marketing, for 10 years. But before that, I actually am old enough to be able to say that I was literally around working at this small technology company called IBM. That back in the day, you never got fired for hiring IBM. Right? That was the word. So this new little thing called the internet and the Netscape browser and the World Wide Web was coming out, and big companies were saying, well, apparently we need this website thing. And I just was at the right place, right time, and got put on some teams to build websites for like General Motors and some a lot of bigger companies at the time. Fast forward, my background was actually technology and marketing from a classic training perspective in college. So I took that knowledge from all the development side of building websites, and then as we're watching it grow, I was out in California in the kind of late 90s with all the startups out there. I mean, watching things like Google be created, right? And I do have a good story there where I did get caught up in that whole VC game where I was at a startup, fourth person in, we had raised like 20-something million dollars over a few years. And after a couple of years, had nothing to show for it. So if you want to know how to spend $20 million and have nothing to show for it, I do have that experience. But but I've learned to actually, read my Profit First book and do a much better job of managing our company now. That was just a crazy time. It was like all about eyeballs and growing fast. But so I feel like I've been at the intersection of like kind of technology and marketing as it applies to like digital for really as long as it's really been around. So it's given me an interesting purview of watching. Sometimes I'll read an article about, somebody's like got this whole new idea and I'm like, yeah, that's 15 years old and it worked great then, doesn't work now, so like having that kind of be almost like a historical view on where we've gotten, I think has really provided a lot of benefit to kind of, where I'm at and being able to have the ability to go talk on the topic and feel very comfortable in front of audiences, answering any question they come up with, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I get this question a lot myself, and because I'm not a lawyer and I serve lawyers, why legal?
Yeah, interesting. I had a company in Chicago that I had just sold a stake back to the main business partner, and was kind of just figuring out what my next thing was going to be. And this is probably about 15 years ago. And I started doing just some consulting on this, like it was like a friend of a friend. Hey, this stuff. Can you come help my friend? And I ended up with some small businesses that I was helping out. It was not really a money maker. It was just kind of I had time and providing some guidance and stuff. And it was like insurance. They tended to be very local oriented businesses, real estate, insurance. But in there we had some law firms and. Along the way, like there was a lot of referrals that happened, and it seemed to be that two things I noticed. One, the lawyers, we were getting them very successful, results. Like they were, this Google Maps thing was just coming out, right? Like around 12, 13 years ago. So the idea that, that you could have your, little A, B, or C slot with on the map with your firm there was like a whole new thing. And so we knew what to do. So we got people ranked pretty quickly and they're like, my goodness, business went really well. And so they started referring us around. And next thing I know, like 80% of my clients were law firms and they were the easiest ones to work with. I know like people always, give law firms and lawyers a bad rap and stuff, but I think that the ones that understand that, they want to grow, that they are running a business, that, yes, they practice law, but if you hang a shingle, you run a business. And when they understand that, man, I mean, great things can happen. And I also think the second thing we noticed was lawyers were used to spending a lot of money on what I thought was really bad marketing, right? Like the amount people were spending on like a yellow page ad. Like in my marketing materials, in my talks 15 years or, well, I guess, when we really dove in on legal, even as much as 10, 11 years ago, I still had slides about why you shouldn't be using the yellow pages, Moshe. So
right, and what's funny is that if you went to the yellow page example in talks today, there'd be some people in the audience who won't even know what you're talking about.
Oh yeah, yeah. I remember talking
what are
about
yellow pages?
I joked about it one time, and like I think one of my kids said that one time, like what do you mean by yellow pages? Like we were joking about this kind of conversation, and it's like, oh yeah, I guess you've never seen one because we don't have one in our house. I mean, it was the last time you had a yellow page that you actually kept and didn't just throw right in the recycling bin, right?
Right.
But yeah, no, I think they were used to spending money on marketing, but the big difference is, I think, for years for law firms, it was like a once a year marketing decision, right? It's like, okay, what's my yellow page ad going to look like? Do I sign up for the TV bundle or the radio bundle? Maybe I get a billboard, but again, they were like one-time decisions, right? And I think as digital grew, it changed things a lot, right? It's a much more dynamic, what am I doing now? I mean, heck, social media obviously really blew a lot of things up where you have, law firm owners now going, what do I need to post this week, right, on social media?
Right.
So, things changed a lot, but it was, that's kind of like, it was mostly referral, word of mouth, and the fact that we could do more better things because there was budget there.
Yeah, and I think you've been very wise in honing in on a specific vertical and just choosing it and running with it. I'm sure that you probably have some non-legal clients in your repertoire that have come over the years, just stuck around. But that's all you market to, and it allows you to really hone in on, I mean, talking at bar, events and going to legal conferences and stuff like that. And lawyers need to understand that they're in the same boat, right? You gotta have your vertical so that you can focus on your specific market to keep honing in on it and growing it. But something very interesting that you mentioned is, where we've come from. And I think that one of the biggest differences between old style marketing and marketing today is the ability, the ability to have tracking that is so real time. Back then when it was yellow pages or a radio spot or a TV spot or a billboard, they didn't even have something like call rail, right? There was no way to know, even though I'm spending all this money on marketing, there was really no way to know, is that paying off? So it was kind of just based on the size of the firm, you were able to afford a certain budget and you just spent it in these different areas. Today, we're in a different place. We're in a place where we have instant knowledge on what's happening with our efforts. We know whether people are clicking on it, whether they're reading it, whether they're responding to it, whether they're taking the next step, where they're getting lost in the process, if we're tracking it right. But we have the tool set, and anybody, even the most small law firm, somebody just starting out, could have the same tool set that a massive firm of 100 attorneys can be using, and be able to make adjustments based on that. And I think that is massive in the ability to really get the right marketing for your firm, so that you're not wasting a ton of marketing dollars in places that they're not needed.
Yeah, I mean, I obviously totally agree with that, because we've talked about measurement and tracking, and I'll add a couple things. So one, the offline can be measured as well, right? So we have clients who do radio or billboard as well. They've been doing it for a while. We tracked it. We added maybe a special URL that's very easy for somebody to remember, and then we can track directly that way. We add a special phone number, right? Like I said, we just add, fire up another call rail number, right? And use that in that ad, magazine ad or newspaper ad or the billboard. And we've been able to show that, well, that radio ad or whatever you're running did work really well. It did convert somebody to an actual client that we were able to track, because they used the call to action tools that we gave them. And the other thing I'll put on metrics and measuring and stuff is there is a little bit of a downside to it, in that, in Moshe, you and I have talked about this a lot. And I think, we joke about the term marketing, the marketing math and all the things.
Yep.
Like that. It's like you get people that they use vanity metrics. They use all these metrics and they assume that somebody doesn't know about them. So they're just like, well, look, your impressions were up, all this stuff. Look how awesome we are. You should be paying us more money, right? And it's like, yeah, but if you get a lot of impressions and nobody turned into a client, who cares?
The perfect example to that is at our last law firm growth summit. We spent a lot of money on Facebook ads. We spent almost $60,000 on Facebook ads for our last summit, and we turned one ad on. So I read somewhere that if you tell Facebook to send the ad worldwide, Facebook will then get the data that it needs to figure out which countries are getting the most activity from your ad. And what ended up happening is all of a sudden leads for us were costing somewhere between 20 and $50 a lead, right? It's really expensive in the legal vertical to get leads. And we turned on worldwide, and all of a sudden we were getting leads at $1, 50 cents, $1.50. And it was, all of a sudden it looked like this ad is doing incredible, right? But then when we start looking, all of the clicks were coming from Pakistan and, all of those Middle Eastern countries. And they weren't even necessarily attorneys, but even if they were, we got an influx of some of those people into our Facebook group and maybe podcast listeners. But the reality is that not one of them has turned into a buyer of any of our stuff. They never paid a penny, and they're probably not going to, because they're not the right target market for us. Legal is not a lucrative business in their country like it is here. And they don't have the dollars to spend to invest in growing their firm. And even growth is maybe it's controlled, right? They're not allowed to grow beyond a certain point. There's a hierarchy of what type of firm you can be based on, where you fall and, whose kid you are and who you're related to. So what's interesting is that the metrics that look great, looks like, oh my gosh, we got so many clicks or so many conversions on the ad. And the reality is that didn't mean anything. So them just bringing home your point that it depends on the numbers you're looking at. Ultimately, you have to look at what is your goal and make sure that your metrics that you're measuring are aligned with that goal and not necessarily too far early in the process where you're kind of skipping the whole point of what you're doing. But where I really want to go with this conversation is when we look at where marketing has gone today from where it was, we have a whole new world of options in front of us that now that we have this ability to track on the fly, we tend to make changes too quickly and we tend to give up on something too quickly. And there's this massive overwhelm for a law firm owner to determine where should I spend my marketing dollars next, or where should I spend my effort, my time on marketing next, and which is going to be the right thing that's going to bring results. I have somebody who was a 2-time guest on this podcast, and he's really, his firm is growing and he's doing really well. And he told me that his marketing team always has a list of marketing ideas that they're picking from on what they're going to do next. And that list is never less than 80 items on the list, right? And the reality is that there's so many options out there. I mean, you could be doing networking, you could be doing in-person events, you can be doing content strategies, YouTube, podcasting, Facebook Live, TikTok and Clubhouse and all of that stuff, right? You can also be doing SEO. You could be doing writing. You could be doing the writing yourself. You could be hiring a ghostwriter. You could be doing radio spots, billboards, TVs. There is so many things that you could be doing, and there's no way that anybody can do all of them at once right away, right? But as we grow, we can add to it. The problem is that the marketing agencies that are out there, or I shouldn't even call it marketing agencies, because, for example, if you want to have somebody write articles for you, you need to hire a good ghostwriter, right? So you're not necessarily getting that at your marketing firm. You're getting that at another provider. So there's all these different providers who have a great service that are now marketing to you to try to get your attention. And what's happening is that our law firm owners are in this state of overwhelm of like, okay, where do I go? Like, should I be spending $3,000 on SEO, or am I better off spending $3,000 on Google pay-per-click? Or should I not be spending any money and be fixing my Google My Business profile and getting myself in the map pack somehow? Maybe I'm, putting in some elbow grease and getting some reviews on Google. And sure, they can happen at the same time. We only have so much time in the day, and we only have so much money. So what I would like to explore with you, Mark, is there some questions that our listeners can ask themselves based on practice area, based on size, based on what's worked before, for them to try to figure out where is the next step that they should go?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. And one of the things that I think we try to do, and I try to do outside of even just the work we do, for paying clients, but with, podcasts and books and things, is, and from education perspective, we try to come across as like, pushing people to think strategic, pushing people to think like business owners. Marketing is a business function, right? And whether you're a business owner of one or you're a Fortune 500 company, right? The CMO role is there. Like it's either you, part-time, or you actually have somebody, or you outsource it to an agency or something, right? So like marketing is a important function, marketing and sales. And I think they're really, tightly combined and should be tightly combined, especially in a service-based business like the legal profession, right? So the couple of questions I always kind of ask people, the first biggest one is, where are you comfortable? Like starting off the bat, like, where are you going to gravitate toward? And that's not a bad thing to just say, if you're going to be comfortable going here and I'm going to ask you to go do something every week, then you're going to be more likely to do that thing than this other, like go do a TikTok video, because that's totally out of your comfort zone, right?
Right.
And so that's just one question to think about. And it's more of a really think internal, like, where have you been comfortable? And that could be, man, I love going to networking events, or, I've got some relationships with people at the country club that, I love playing my round of golf with. And there's there's a financial guy, and there's like a chiropractor or a doctor, where, like maybe I'll just work on the referral game, like you just kind of provide them value and see if the referrals can grow. So that, like it's where you're comfortable. So that's a little internal thought process, right? And think about it, like if you enjoy being on social media and kind of like getting fired up, going back and forth and chatting, yeah, that's fine. I mean, we both know people who have done very well with next to no budget, just engaging a lot on social media. So I mean,
Absolutely.
The interesting thing is you can't let one person say, there are experts out there who are great at their one thing, right? So don't let anybody come and say, if you're not doing this, you're losing out on business, because all these different marketing tactics, and they're all tactics, right? Like we've talked about tactics versus strategies in past,
Right.
and kind of gets to that point, but they're all tactics, like whether it's like radio or it's like SEO or it's paid ads, right? They're tactics. The strategy is you want to drive, new business in, and you want to convert that into a paying client, and you want that to be the type of client you want to work with more and more over time, right? So initially it's, you'll take whatever, like if you're just starting out, you're going to take kind of, whatever cases you can get. And over time, you're going to hone into the expertise and the reviews and all that kind of stuff that give you the ability to kind of take the exact cases you want. You're going to figure out if you want to hire people and all that kind of stuff. So the first point, what are you comfortable with? And that's a little bit of self-reflection. I don't really have a perfect, data point to go off of. The
Right.
second thing,
I want to, before you go to the second point, I just want to hone in on something that you shared and maybe take it even one further step, which is, yeah, these are all tactics and they all work, right? Yeah. So somebody's like, oh, which is the one that I should do because I want to get the one that works for me. And the reality is that they all work. If done properly, every single marketing strategy can bear fruit and can produce results for you. And it's really a question of what you're saying is comfort and affordability and time, and which I'm sure is where you're going to go with some more of your questions, like what can you do? But the reality is that if you're asking, does this work, you're asking the wrong question, because ask that question and I will find you somebody who's achieving success with it.
And that's right. I mean, the so many people, and they'll see one other law firm or lawyer kind of getting up on Facebook and showing their success with, I don't know, like a ClickFunnels campaign or a paid ad campaign or some Facebook
or TikTok
or the TikTok video, right? I mean, there are people who've done well on TikTok and made money on it and you're getting clients. So yeah, you could do it, but all these different things have success stories. It's just, where are you comfortable? And I think the budget one is where I was going to go next. I mean, that is a piece you need to think about. If you're comfortable doing something, but it's going to cost some money, like what money do you have? So what I always recommend is, and it's a rule of thumb more than anything, but like I always say, you should be spending 8 to 12% on marketing
of revenue.
Of your revenue. Yes. Yeah. Not profit. Yeah. Of your revenue. So if you're making, only $100,000 a year, there's only so much for marketing, right? And that marketing also is going to have to include, the letterhead and stuff you ordered for the clients and the envelopes and stuff, right? Because that all gets thrown into marketing budget. We know that. Or if you're running your own campaigns or, some of the paid, maybe you did a paid directory on Avo or something, right? So that's, and 100,000 at 8% isn't a lot, right? So when somebody comes to you and says, well, this is going to be, like you said, like a $3,000 a month marketing campaign to hit your goals. It's like, well, I mean, some people I'm sure pull in some savings and do something, but like for me, it's take your steps, reinvest, like if you grow a little bit, you can reinvest that in marketing. And I'm going to say that if you're in the 8% side, you're probably staying a little bit more still, but you're not going to go down because other people are spending money, right? Like people are spending on marketing. And so you do have competition. It's not just you. You got to understand that. And I think a lot of people forget that. It's like, well, I'm spending on this. It's like, yeah, but so is everybody else. Right. Like we have the same thing, right? As marketing our own businesses, right? There's other people doing things that, we compete against. So that's one. And if you're on like the 12% side, you're probably on the, okay, I'm trying to grow, And if you stay in that range, and I'll talk to people, and they're like, oh my gosh, I'm paying 30%. I'm like, well, are you growing it? Are you growing at a much faster clip? Are you hiring the people you need? Is that where you're at? And if they're not, then you might be better off, slowing it down a little bit and doing it right. And to your point of find the tactic that works, spend where you can spend, and then just, grow that. And then you can layer on other tactics.
Finding amazing employees is the toughest job for any business, and especially for a law firm. You deserve to be the law firm owner you've always wanted to be, but you can't get there without a great team. Get Staffed Up helps you build your all-star team by staffing your law firm with incredible full-time offshore virtual assistants. Work with Get Staffed Up to save money and your biggest resource, time, while they find you the best English-speaking VAs in the world. Hashtag delegate your way to freedom. To learn more, go to profitwithlaw.com/get staffed up. profitwithlaw.com/get staffed up. Thanks to our sponsor, Smith AI. Smith AI is a superior virtual receptionist service for small businesses. They specialize in working with solo and small law firms. I discovered Smith AI a couple of years ago and was blown away by the range of services, which are available at a cost any attorney, even those of you in the smallest solo practice, can afford. Their friendly receptionists respond to potential clients in English or Spanish, screen and schedule new leads, and even take payment for consults. The best part is, they don't just handle these conversations by phone. They also have live agents and chatbots capturing leads on websites and via text message. If there's one growth hack to your practice, this is it. Smith's friendly gatekeepers can staff your front lines. They'll capture new leads while you work uninterrupted. You can finally have the peace of mind that while you're working, you're not missing out on future work. Plans start at just $210 a month for calls and $140 a month for chats. They even offer a totally free chatbot, so there's no excuse. Try Smith AI today and see for yourself why attorneys like Justy Nickel in Colorado say Smith AI receptionists are the secret to business growth and client happiness. Smith AI offers a free trial, and podcast listeners can get an extra $100 discount with promo code ProfitLaw100. That's ProfitLaw100. Sign up and learn more at www.smith.ai. Trust me when I say, don't let another day go by. Try Smith AI. Yeah, and there's a whole a slew of points that I want to add here to this numbers conversation. First of all, I'm a numbers guy. For those of you who hate numbers, this is going to be a painful part of this podcast because you're listening. We're not even visualizing it on a whiteboard or anything, right? But the reality is that if you have listened to anything that I've spoken about with Profit First and you understand how that works, Profit First gives you guidance on what percentage of your revenue should be going to OpEx based on the size of your business. And up to $250,000 of revenue, that number for OpEx is 30%, right? Because 50% is supposed to be going home to you, which is not a lot, right? If you're making 100,000, 50% coming home to you means you're making 50 grand. And, maybe in some parts of the country, that's a decent amount, but here in New York, you'd be almost homeless at that level, right? So you got to grow that pretty quick, but 30% is your entire operating expenses. You can't possibly spend 30% on marketing and have a healthy business. Now you could have it and have a not healthy business, right? Maybe you have a spouse that's bringing in an income and you're like, I don't need to take an income right now, so I'm willing to spend a little bit more on marketing. That's fine. Or maybe you have money in savings that you're willing to invest in the business, and that's also okay, right? I have one client I'm working with that has a decent amount of money that they're starting with, and they're working on a contingency-based practice. And I encourage them to get rid of the other work they were doing, which was bringing in cash right now, use the money that they had to build the stuff that they need so that they have that pipeline of business coming in, and they're going to have to wait 18 months to have that revenue come in. But they had the capital to put in, right? They had the money to invest to allow that to happen. And the reality is that you have to know your situation and you have to know your risk tolerance level. Because money it's tied to risk in such a intricate and magnetic way that we don't realize, where you might have $50,000 in savings and say, okay, well, I can carry a $3,000 a month marketing budget for 6 months. It'll take almost half of my savings, but I'm willing to do that. But then at the end of 6 months, or when you're getting close, you're blowing through that money, and then you're not seeing results because results take longer than 6 months to come. All of a sudden, you start to get worried that you wasted your money, and now you may pull the plug too early on a strategy that will pay the dividends, but you just didn't give it long enough. So you really have to understand your tolerance of being able to sustain that if if it takes longer than expected. Whereas if you're running a $500,000 firm and you choose to take $3,000 a month out of OpEx and spend it on marketing, and it takes 9 months instead of 6 months, it's not making you lose sleep at night, because it's not really hurting your ability to take home money and pay your rent, or depleting your savings.
Yeah, I mean, if I can add on to this, it's an interesting thing, and I don't think this is talked about enough. And I know, like when we start talking profit first and kind of business stuff, that we go this direction whenever we talk Moshe. But one of the things I think that it's a little bit of a disservice is in a service industry where you're low capital expenses, right? You can basically hang a shingle, say you now practice, and you could get some clients and start making some money, like being able to, send out some invoices and collect some things. But in like a business like a restaurant or something, right? I mean, like you're told you need to have 18 months to 24, in your back pocket to like last through all the equipment you got to buy, all the staff you have to hire ahead of time, all the advertising to get stuff out, the decorations and stuff. Like all that stuff, takes time, and it takes forever to recoup that. And in professional services, it's like you can kind of get away with making a little bit of money right away and kind of going, oh, I know what I'm doing here. This is great, and then suddenly it's like, oh, when you really dive in the numbers and you're not spending on operations, or you're not really thinking about your cost of goods sold separate from that, who's a client facing person versus like overhead kind of people in your firm. And again, these are things that as you grow that you should be thinking about and working with someone to understand that. But that's where it is. I mean, 30%, like let's think about the big things in your OpEx, right? Your lease for your office space,
Right.
A couple employees that, maybe are kind of client facing, but also kind of support staff, right? Some systems and tools.
I mean, look, even without employees, right? Somebody who's spending, I mean, let's just assume you're not running a virtual practice. If you're running a virtual practice, you can make the numbers work differently, right? But let's assume that you got yourself an office space, which everybody, like 85% of attorneys who start out get themselves an office space. They sign a lease, and you're, first of all, there's so many pitfalls with that, and I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. But let's just say $1,500 a month, $2,000 a month is what you're paying. I don't know, is that on the high side? I don't think you can get an office space for less than that, right? So, let's say $1,500 a month, and I'm not going to try to embarrass myself here on the podcast. Let's pull out a calculator. 1,500 times 12, that's $18,000. Divide that by 0.3, that's 30% of your OpEx. You need 60,000 in revenue just to cover the cost of your rent before you add anything else.
Yep.
And then you've got your malpractice insurance, and then you've got your bar association fees, and then you've got your basic software like email and your website, and like all these expenses that you start to put together before you turn around easily without anything optional like marketing. We'll call that optional, right, Mark? Without anything optional, you got to be at 3,000 a month in operating expenses. So that's, you got to have 100,000 in revenue. You got to have 10,000 a month, or 8,500 a month, to just get your business to be healthy enough to sustain the basic expenses that you're starting off with.
Right. And that's why I say that like the CMO position doesn't go away. It just may be you, right? It may be nights and weekends, cleaning up stuff, like, or doing some of the tactics that we could talk about, right? Like you said, maybe it's just focusing on that Google My Business profile, because that's the one thing somebody said to do, and you're comfortable getting in there and doing that. Maybe it is writing some content or recording some videos. Like there are some things, that a sweat equity will go a long way. And if that's in your 50% of if you think about it, that's in your 50% of your take home, right? I mean, it's you're taking some of that revenue and you're just having to do that job for now. And eventually you get to the point where you can outsource a part of that job. And then eventually you hire somebody to do that job. And then, and that's how I recommend people think about it. So I always say, like with that 8 to 12%, I mean, it's like if you're not doing 250 to 300,000, just stop, thinking you're going to find an agency that's going to have the right price for you and be able to actually do something that moves the needle. Think about doing a lot of little pieces on your own. There's plenty of books and podcasts and like incubators, like you were talking about, where people will help you through for lower costs and give you some coaching. But it's here's a little bit of coaching, but you got to do the sweat equity, right? You got to do the elbow grease. And that's
so. Mark, I'm gonna interrupt you for a second. Okay, so I actually want to get to, okay, what if you're not in this stage and you're further along, but for somebody in this stage where you can't afford to bring in an outside marketer, you might have a little bit of money to spend on your own, but you got to do some of your own things. You got to take some of your own time, and you got to learn how to do some things. What are the top 5 things that you think somebody should do when they're doing it on their own? Maybe that doesn't cost them anything or cost them very minimally. That's going to really move the needle for them in their marketing efforts.
Yeah, I think, and this goes for anybody, I think you need to budget just a little bit to have a basic website and have somebody help you do that, whether you can get away with something, and again, know that you're probably going to replace this once you have a bigger budget, but just have something. There is just an entire generation now that believes if you don't have a website, you don't have a business. So it just, maybe they're less than 30, but like they're probably a potential client for a lot of you out there, right? So, so just have a basic website. Get that done. You check that box, have it. I mean, look, obviously we don't typically, when we're working with our type of clients, aren't recommending like Squarespace or GoDaddy or something, but dude, if you're just getting going and you got, a few $100s, get it up, have somebody maybe help with some graphics on Upwork or something. And you probably get a website for $500 and be happy enough with it, knowing that down the road, you're going to change it. It's fine. But you need a website. It's a central place you're going to use everywhere. You're going to reference, people are going to point to it. And then the biggest thing I recommend is working on your referral and your email lists. That is the one thing you can control and you can own long term. And if you start now, that will come back and pay in spades over time. You've got, you can create an email once a month that you send that talks about some things. That's, shouldn't be more than a couple hours of work a month. Maybe a little bit more the first time and the second time, but you'll get better at it. And a couple hours a month of your time to write some things that go in an email newsletter. You can make them just one paragraph each of some topics. Don't even send them to a deeper article. Just be top of mind. And most people aren't going to read it, but they're going to see the subject line and they're going to see your name there. And they're going to remember when somebody asks them for referrals, like, oh, wait, I worked with that one person, or I know that one person. So building that email list and just starting with your referral network in that email list, right? Like almost writing it to your referral network. That's an area that I think is big. Google My Business, as much as you need a website, if you're going to a website just to have, you need Google My Business and you need to like monitor that a little bit. Like that's actually something I recommend if you do nothing else and you can do it on your own. There's plenty of articles out there. I'm sure we have some stuff on our website, that probably like walks through step by step of some things, right? I mean, there's definitely some, we talk about in our book and I mean, Moshe, I think we did a whole, a couple things in the incubator on Google My Business multiple times. So Google My Business is something where you just can't ignore it. It basically is your first website. We actually have, again, data, shows a lot of things here. We have clients that get more calls tracked from somebody just going to the Google My Business and calling, because you can look at the insights on Google My Business, right? We can track all that. So we can see they're getting more calls from their Google My Business than they are from their website. I mean, they're still getting them from the website. People are going that, but like that Google My Business, people just see it. You can make that look so good that that's enough for somebody to call you. And especially if you're doing the first thing I mentioned, which is relying on and pushing referrals. Somebody like let's be honest, like in this day and age, we're not giving like a business card to somebody and say, here's the attorney you need to call, right? It's oh, call, so-and-so. And what do you do, Moshe? If somebody tells you something, you grab your phone in your pocket and you pick it up and you say, this person, and then you're looking at their stuff right there. And if they don't have a website, if you can't even find their picture online and somebody else comes up first or there's a bad review, you're just kind of going, my friend who referred this person is crazy. I'm not going to call them. So,
Right.
there's that kind of idea of like protecting that referral using Google My Business. So those are like, we got referrals.
Well, we have website first.
Yep, website, work on your referrals, and I recommend getting like email list going. We
Okay.
can talk about lead magnets and lead gen and stuff, and there's, I mean, heck, we did whole workshops on that. You probably could link to some of those.
Right. So actually, let me just interrupt you for a second. So if you guys want a deeper dive into this, we actually have a program designed to help you get from 0 to 250K in revenue. And there's a success path in there. We literally walk you through the step-by-step. So go to profitwithlaw.com/incubator, join us there. It's inexpensive. And you can really get through those first steps so you can get to the point that we're going to talk about in a moment when
Correct.
you're beyond 250K and you actually have money to spend on your marketing. So we're not going to go into the nitty-gritty details of these steps because those are all covered in the incubator. So number 1, website. Number 2, referrals. Number 3, email list. Number 4, Google My Business. Number 5.
So number 5 is probably social media, just because it's free and easy. But if you're not comfortable there, just skip 5. Wait a little bit, come back to it. But when I say social media, I would always recommend starting to think about answering questions on video and just generating some content that's really easy for a lawyer to generate, because they're answering questions all day on the phone. So just answer questions in front of a iPhone camera. Have somebody ask you the question, right? And and then there's all things you can do there with the content and leverage that. Moshe, I'm sure you probably do. I mean, we do it. You probably do it, right? You take your podcast and then you transcribe it, and then you get some blog posts written, and then you cut some snippets down for some social media posts and images, right? We do that. So we're not saying do something that we don't do for ourselves, right? It does work, and it doesn't cost that much more energy once you get into a cadence. But that would be, to me, a bigger 5th step of really rolling up your sleeves now and saying, okay, I don't want to just kind of be okay. I want to grow, and I want to get to this point where I'm able to outsource all this stuff, because eventually you can kind of give that to somebody, right?
Yeah, and I think that just saying social media could be overwhelming to people because there's so many different things you can do on social. Yeah. And I don't want you to get lost in that rabbit hole. So I think that maybe we can, number 5 is your profiles, right? Have a good LinkedIn profile. Make sure your Facebook is clean and it's not, you partying with a bunch of other people that's open to the public that people could see. People are going to check you out. They're going to look on Facebook. They're going to look on Instagram. They're going to look on LinkedIn. They're going to look at Avo. They're going to look at these listing companies. Now, I'm not saying go spend money on those listings and anything like that. There's way too much emphasis that they teach you that you need to spend money with them in order to get a higher rating. And that's not important. What's important is that when somebody looks for you, they find you. So make sure that you actually have a listing. Make sure you're actually there. And I think that once those profiles are there and it's clear what you do and what you're all about, now you actually have a presence. And then from there, you can build on it. You can try to figure out, okay, how do I harness social, which is a whole separate conversation. We're not going to have time to go into that today. I want to move on, Mark, to, okay, somebody's beyond the baby steps, right? They're achieving success. They've done all this themselves. And they know and know the value of getting things off their plate. And they know the value of hiring somebody who knows what they're doing, who can now achieve the next level of success. And the truth is that when we think about it in the grand scheme of things, like $3,000 for this, $3,000 for that, they're insignificant numbers when you look at, can this increase can this increase me from 10 clients a month to 15, right? Because when I can bring in another 5 clients at $5,000, that $3,000 expense makes a lot of sense when I bring in $25,000 more of business. So don't do them all at once, but we can very quickly, once we start spending money on marketing, we can very quickly start adding additional marketing strategies once we've demonstrated that the money that we're investing in this is paying dividends, because we're constantly achieving a better result. So the question that we asked was, do you have money to spend? And we focused on the people who the answer was no. Now, if the answer is yes, what's the next step?
Right. So the next step, so you've got kind of like that we talked about the people who didn't have, and I will add one quick thing. All the stuff you talked about, directories and everything, we lump that under something we call protect your referrals. And like literally, I think the first third of our book is all of that stuff. So if you just grab that and follow through that, it talks about all the directories and all that, social media profiles, because people search your name, and just make sure you kind of control a lot of what's there, like, and then you're good on that. So I'm glad you mentioned all the directories and stuff, but yeah, that's what we kind of lump under protect your referrals. Just make sure if somebody's looking for you, it looks good. All of that foundation stuff still matters, right? So if you now have money, so let's say you're 300 to 500 in range. Now you're kind of saying, well, do I hire somebody or do I outsource some of this stuff? And that's a tough decision. I think in that range, what I always kind of joke is that it's hard to hire an agency of one. I've got a lot of people, right, like an experts and stuff. And so whether you use freelancers and kind of like manage it yourself as kind of the general contractor of all this work, right? Or you look to an agency and have them kind of do some of the work, you can outsource the kind of like CMO and some of the doing with an agency, or you can be the CMO and outsource some of the doing with freelancers. And I'm not going to say that, like obviously I run an agency, and of course I would want you to think that way, but no, I mean, there's people who do a great job, and occasionally, check in with us and say, hey, can you check my strategy, but I'm going to go use these freelancers or whatever, and that's fine. In that realm, you've now jumped from all the foundation stuff we talked about to, okay, what are you looking for? Like, are you, your numbers, at this point, if you don't know your numbers, that's the first thing we're doing. We're going to dive much more into metrics. Okay, we're going to because and all this other stuff, I didn't say like start tracking. I just say get some traction, right? Now we're saying start tracking, like, where are things coming from? You're getting leads, you're getting clients, you're getting clients on some consistent basis to have this kind of like, almost $500,000 in revenue a year. But where's it coming from, and what's turning the best, from leads into clients? And getting that understood and tracked may even require some process changes in your firm, right? So maybe you weren't even tracking or asking some of these questions or thinking about that. So we're going to dial into metrics first. And then we're going to say, okay, based on these metrics, what's the realistic goal? So you're getting, like you mentioned, 10 clients a month. To think you're going to go to 30 clients a month in a few months is a lot different than to say, well, I just want 5 more clients in the next 6 months. Consistently, once we do that, now we can invest a little bit more to get another 5. And now we're up to 10, now we're up to 20, we're 30. So it's metrics are going to help drive goals. Once you have the goals, then we're going to kind of say what strategies make sense for that goal in your market, with your competition, with where you're currently at. And this is where like the tactics come into play a little bit. And there's some comfort. It's like, hey, I've been using radio. I like these guys. They're good. Well, let's measure it. Is it still working? Hey, that's working. That's great. How do we just plus it up? How do we maybe add a lead magnet that you send them to get something really cool on the website? So now you're maybe getting the email address in addition to just the lead, maybe calling you here and there. So you have people you can follow up with, right? So there's ways to kind of like measure the things you're already using and then start layering in new things. I think you're going to hear a lot of people talk about SEO at this point. So, if you're thinking on the digital side and driving leads, a good long-term thing to start beginning is SEO. Now, SEO, search engine optimization, is not going to be, I turn it on and suddenly I get 5 more leads tomorrow, because it takes a little bit of time. It's going to be very content oriented, like website structuring. We did talk about the fact you might need a website upgrade depending on what you did the first round. So there might be some need there to make the search engine optimization work. So from a list perspective, we've talked about metrics, talked about possibly need to upgrade our website. And then we talked about putting the foundation. I'm not saying go crazy, on SEO, but like put the foundation in so that you have a nice long-term growth. Then it's about speed, right? Then if your strategy is, I'm okay adding like 1 or 2 clients a month for the next, so many months to get to like the extra 10, or is it, I really am planning on hiring 2 associates. They're awesome. I really want to get them on board. I need clients for them. Then we might be saying, okay, well, that's a little bit of a speed play, right? So what are the things we can do for speed? Paid advertising, Facebook ads, paid Google ads. We know people are searching in your city on these type of things, terms that are things that you can help them with, whatever your practice area is. Somebody is out on Google searching for this. Paid ads is one of the fastest way to kind of get some of those eyeballs to your website. It costs a little bit more in the beginning, but it is very like a quick hit. But you turn it off, it ends. So that there's the, the pros and cons there. But it does work, and we use it all the time. And sometimes we'll use, depending on what somebody's budget is, we'll use both, right? We'll start with that kind of groundswell of search engine, and then layer in a paid strategy, whether it's social, Google, or both. And you mentioned even directories. Some people, there are some cities where we do the searches and look at the competition, and the paid directory might be a really good play for somebody to do that. FindLaw is ranking really well in this particular market on these keywords. Maybe we do go pay that because nobody else is doing that. So like, but we're measuring, right? We're measuring, never sign up for something more than 3 months so that we can measure and get in and get out. That's where you're, and when you're in that kind of $500,000 range, you're making decisions on speed and where you're looking to go. So goals are really starting to drive things, right? But hopefully at this point, you're having some smarter business conversations. You understand your metrics and your numbers better, not just from marketing, but also from, where all the different money's going in your business. How does it grow? What's variable, what's fixed, right? So as your clients grow, some expenses are variable, right? And they kind of go with that, and some are fixed. And so you can take some of that, know that, oh, I'm going to have some extra profit on this. And so I can roll some of that into marketing, or I can put that in my back pocket and take it home. Those are important conversations. And that's the kind of stuff I know Moshe and I love talking about when we talk about profit first and all the stuff that you do. I think it's so important to have the metrics understood, not just marketing, to have these conversations, because they're business conversations and ROI conversations. They're not just what's the fancy marketing toy.
Right. And the other thing to keep in mind is that you're never waiting until your budget allows the expense. You're always, the investment is always preceding the outcome that's going to come from it. I did a great podcast on this concept because you actually have a secret weapon in your law firm to kind of get you over that hump. And that's the way that you price your services. So if you go to profitwithlaw.com/237, it's episode 237. It's called Your Law Firm Secret Weapon. And I did a whole episode talking about when are you ready to invest in your next step in your firm. And I think it's really important to understand that whenever you're making a decision like this, it's an investment. You're not waiting until all the stars are aligned and everything's perfect and you have all this extra money to spend, because if you did, you'd be hampering your growth. It would take you years to get to that point. The reality is that it's the chicken or the egg conversation, and the marketing expense is going to have to be a little bit painful when you take it on so that you can produce that massive result afterwards. And the more that you do that, the more that you're willing to take risks like that, the faster your momentum will be. And I don't think that this is I want to achieve overnight success. I think it's a matter of accelerating from getting to where you want in 5 years versus it taking you 20 years. So you have to get comfortable with going out on a limb and trusting your gut and knowing this is the next step for me. And I'm going to make an investment that initially might, eat into my profit, might eat into my take home, but it's a short-term thing that, I know that my timeline is 6 months or 9 months or a year, and it's going to pay for itself. And I'll be back in not in the same position, but in a better position because I made this move. So I think it's understanding the business side of it and understanding, when to make that investment decision is very important, which we're not going to cover here. Just go back and listen to that episode.
Yeah. And so in that range, right? So when I say, $500,000 and heading up, then you start kind of getting in okay, I've got multiple, like maybe many associates, or even maybe now a few partners, and there's a few of us doing this, and we're in like the 1 to 3 million range now, right? So like kind of taking to that next level. In that case, like hopefully, like at this point, you've got a trusted, advisor type agency. You're getting kind of that outsourced CMO knowledge as you're getting to this point. But you also start thinking about, do I bring in somebody who is a point marketing person who is going to drive marketing, whether that's, manager, director, CMO type level, that's, for you to determine your comfort level. I know a lot of law firms do these like marketing committees, and then they have kind of like one lower level person. It seems to not work as well because you get a whole management by committee, and then the person who actually you brought in with the expertise doesn't get to make a decision. So, keep an eye out for that one, because I just see it, people fall into the trap of that. But at this range, you're now thinking more than, like there's all the marketing methods and stuff, but you really need to start understanding brand and who you are, who you want to be perceived in the community. And every single person in the firm needs to understand the brand, how we're messaging. When I go out, in the market, we deliver things this way because that matches our brand. Like when you're at that level now, you've kind of gone from I'm just you don't just leads. I mean, that still matters, and you still need all this presence, and you have a point person to do that. Maybe you have some outsourced resources that are just like the machine's running, right? But you need to start now thinking like, okay, is the brand that I have right now the one that I want to go forward? Is this the one we're going to grow with? Like we just work with somebody who, like this, like their thing is like they've been around for like 100 and something years, right? But it was all the names were a bunch of really old white guys, and they realized that half the managing partners right now are female, not all white, right? And they're like, so we want to keep the history, but that persona in the marketplace doesn't match who we are and how we deliver our services today. So they went with a whole new rebranding exercise, right? Like that's an expensive effort, but at that level, when you're at a few $1 million or more, with a few managing partners and a lot of associates and staff, it's very important to really make sure you get that right, because that's going to drive a lot of the other messaging. So there is a big kind of jump there, right? As you're kind of going from, I just want leads and consistent leads and growth, and now I'm hiring people and things, to, oh, now I'm much, it's much different. I'm not just consistent leads and growth. That's happening. And everybody, like has that. We have staff focusing on that. But now I want to make sure in the marketplace that we are delivering in a consistent way. And that's, when I say brand, I'm not just talking about logos. I'm talking about really thinking about how you deliver your services, who you want to deliver your services for. This affects your processes, operational processes. It affects how you're tracking things, how you're rewarding people, how you're hiring people. But getting those messages understood is really important. Like we've gone through rebranding exercises with firms and had people say, nobody has ever asked me this question. I've been running this firm for 20 years. I never thought, what do I really stand for? What do I stand against? What is important to me? What is my favorite case in my entire 20 years at this firm? Like, how do I do more of that? Like, these are questions that people don't stop and ask enough.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I know rebranding or the branding of the firm is really important. When do you get into like TV ads and billboards and radio and radio ads and things like that, where you're probably setting yourself up for a bigger expense? You're probably not doing as good a job of finding exactly who you're looking for, but you're creating a name for yourself in the marketplace, and people start to get to recognize you. Maybe you get the jingle that everybody remembers or things like that. When is somebody ready for that?
So that comes down to really understanding your market, right? So if you know that your market can be reached in very specific ways, like my market can be reached 1 hour after Ellen's on at 10 o'clock, that market is watching this channel. Great. But if you're going to go all in on TV, you're probably spending like they usually say like 3 people can be in a market and everybody else is ignored. And the third person in most markets, and this is mid markets, right? Mid markets, the third person is typically spending about $500,000 or more in TV. So like that, again, that you're not spending that. If you're spending less than that and thinking, oh, I'm doing TV, you're just it's probably wasting some of your money. Radio, you can get into a little bit lower cost and do some, like I said, we've had clients that do great in radio. Like newspaper, we had early on some great stuff in like, newspaper and magazines. The newspaper works well now if you're like interviewed or doing from a PR play. But
Right.
Putting an ad in a newspaper, doesn't really do anything.
So right. And PR is that's a whole other animal, right? I mean, you hire a PR agency, and they, they try to get you these spots to be able to be the expert that's in a spot on a show, or you're writing a guest post, or in a well-known magazine or things like that.
Yeah, and all the PR agencies that like I know and would respect, they pretty much all of them now would consider themselves like PR and social, because so much news is generated through social media. So if your PR agency only talks about, getting you on the TV spot at the 9 o'clock in the morning show, or getting into that newspaper, make sure you're finding somebody who really understands social media. A lot of the writing right now, a lot of the newspaper guys and gals and the interviewers on picking segments on regular TV are using Twitter to drive who they're finding, right? I mean, so they're just going, oh, here's a hot topic. Let me go to Twitter. They search on that topic, they use hashtags, whatever, and they find some people. So if you're not in there on the social media side from a PR play, you're missing out a lot. But yeah, so PR is another angle there. And these things can work together. Again, I still think it's important to have that kind of CMO minded strategy person, whether that's outsourced, in-house, whether you decide that that's the thing that you love, and you're going to kind of take that on in your firm and maybe do less practice and be more of a marketer. That's okay too, right? But like somebody needs to be thinking, how do all the pieces connect? Where are we going? What is the purpose of this? What is the goal? Is it just more leads? Is it, we want to kind of change maybe the perception of the firm. We want to change our kind of target market base. We want to be able to hire a different caliber. A lot of these come back to like, some of the marketing decisions you need to put in place. So I unfortunately, as you get to that level, it does become more complex, but that's why you pay somebody like $100-something grand a year to be your CMO, right? When you're making a few $1 million in revenue. So.
Yeah, and it's almost like you've got an orchestra, and each of these tactics is another instrument or player in the orchestra, and you have to kind of get everything to work together in concert. Everyone's got to be on the same page. You all have to be playing off each other, and that's when everything works. So it's not like, I'm going to be doing TV spots, or I'm going to be doing radio ads, or I'm going to be it's kind of like, okay, what, who's my target market? Where are they? How are we getting their attention? How are we building our brand within that market? And what are the different tactics that we can add to make this work even better, so that they can play off of each other?
I love that analogy, and I haven't really thought about that before, but like, if you think about it, because it can go a couple ways here, right? Like one, totally agree. Like you need that kind of conductor to make sure everybody's working in harmony. But you have kids. I don't know if anybody's did like violin or band or anything, but you go to the elementary or the middle school performance, and it's like, oh boy, here it goes, right? And it's a cacophony of like, just okay, somebody's beautiful in the violin, but then what was that came in, and that totally was missed, and the screech and scratch. And then you go to like a world-class symphony, and everything is just beautiful in it, and it comes together so well. So just throwing tactics at things that aren't working in harmony together, that's kind of what you're going to get into the market. That's what you're putting out there. So that's a really interesting way to think about it. So it's a good analogy, Moshe.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Mark, we're out of time. We have so much fun together. Time flies. We're going to have to just do this again and continue the conversation. This has just been super, super valuable for our listeners to hear. And I love where this went. I know we didn't cover nearly what we, set out to cover today, but hey, we'll get together again. You've got a podcast that you're doing together with Melanie Leonard. What's it called? Your law firm as a business, take it to the next level. And they can go to nextlevel.legal for that. I also know that there's other things you wanted to share. So if you can share with our audience what it is and how they can get it, I'd love to give you that opportunity. And then I always like to leave with, what is one piece of advice that you can give to our listeners, no matter where they're at, that if they took that, that would definitely help them accelerate their growth?
Awesome. Yeah. So the one thing I did talk about my book a couple of times. We for the podcast, your listeners and stuff. What I'm going to do is we have an ebook version, and that's pretty easy because I can offer that for people to come grab and download, especially right now in these times of still kind of like a lot of uncertainty. So please come grab that. But for the first 25 people that request that, we will actually send you a paperback. So we'll send you the actual paperback version. I mean, this is like 300 pages, full color. It's like not one of those quick little tiny books. I mean, there's a lot of good information in there. It's full color because, hey, this is marketing. You need to see this stuff and see what it looks like. So definitely come grab that. I think we created a URL at gngf.com/PWL. So profit with all, right? PWL. So go there and fill out the information. Of course, we practice what we preach. So if you want to see what a really good lead nurturing campaign, the way we would recommend it being set up, read the first 7 emails, because you'll probably see a pattern there of the way we do things. So, and then, go to the incubator and you'll see us talking about the same thing. So that's one thing. The other point of your question of what is one thing that we can tell people and leave them with? Here's something that, so we look at marketing trends all the time, and we're always seeing like where things are going and what's happening. So here's some things we're doing for our clients right now. And I think it's something that is basically like a freebie, easy to do, and nobody's doing it. So everybody in the past year or so had to suddenly start with Zoom calls and added online payments and did all these things that are kind of like handling world, like the way they deliver services in a more digital electronic way, which isn't going to change long term, right? We know that that's kind of the future anyways, and maybe we just we sped that up. But this is the way consumers, we know this is the way consumers want to work with law firms. They want law firms that can get on a Zoom call, so they don't have to drive downtown and park. They want law firms that have like a place where they can put their documents back and forth. They don't want to go look for a fax machine, So like if you're working that way, and you already have it, you spend all this time and money and effort to get your firm working in this more electronic DocuSigns and all these kind of things, right? Nobody's out marketing that. Nobody's on their homepage saying, hey, we know it sucks to go look for parking. It's horrible to kind of go pay for parking downtown or try to sync up your and your spouse's time together. We make that easier by allowing you to do a Zoom call for this thing. We make it easier for allowing electronic signatures, or you can pay by credit card. We have payment plans. Talk about this stuff that you're already doing. This is a freebie, right? And if people are looking for it and they compare you to somebody who doesn't talk about it, guess who they're going to call?
Absolutely. I love that. And I'll also add that if you're trying to become, super savvy with the next generation and digitize everything, remember that there's also people who don't embrace that technology. So I love Mark's advice to advertise what you have available. I just want to throw in one more piece, and that is, don't forget that there's different people who like to do things different ways. And it can be immensely powerful to give people choice in how you communicate with them and how they interact with your office. So when you intake somebody new and you ask them, would you prefer a Zoom call or would you prefer an in-person appointment? Would you prefer electronically signing or would you prefer to come in and sign your documents? When you give them that choice and you respect that, you're now going to meet them where they are. That's gonna really elevate the level of service you're providing. So don't leave the people who are uncomfortable with those things behind because you're changing what you're doing. Figure out a way to make it their choice of how they interact with you. Mark, it's been awesome. Thank you so much for spending your time with us here on the podcast today. Folks, everything that we listed, all the resources, all going to be in the show notes for this episode. The link to that is right in the description of the episode in whichever podcast player you're listening to. So don't worry about it. If you're in the shower, you're out for a run, you're doing the dishes, putting the kids to bed, whatever you're doing while you're listening to us, come back to this episode, click the link when it's convenient for you, and then you can go through and you can download the ebook. You can check out Mark and Melanie's podcast. You can listen to the previous episode that we shared with you. And if you can do one thing for us today, if you really enjoyed this episode and you thought that Mark really brought a ton of great information to it, it was very informative to you, and you have another friend who can benefit from this, take this episode and share it with them. That's the one ask I have of you. I think that if each of us shares it with somebody, that can have a massive effect for us. They in turn will then turn and share it with somebody else and pay it forward. And that's how we can really grow not only grow the show, but also grow the knowledge of the industry and help everybody. And a rising tide raises all boats. And I think that we can work together to further everyone's success at the same time that we're furthering ours. So appreciate you folks. We're here twice a week, every Tuesday and Thursday. We'll catch you on our next episode coming up on Tuesday. Take care. That's it for this week's episode of Profit with Law. If you have enjoyed the show, please consider sharing it with at least one person. Imagine how many lives we can change if we each shared this episode. Another way to share the episode is on social media. We appreciate your support and look forward to you joining us again next week.